It's a lady in London here. Today I'm coming to you from the country of Georgia. I'm going to take you around and show you the best of Tbilisi and the surrounding area. From wine tours to monasteries and mountains, there's a lot to love about this country. I can't wait to show you around. As always, the full details are on my blog, aladyinlondon.com, but for now, let's go see what we find.
We've based ourselves in Tbilisi for our stay. While we're in town, we're staying at a hip hotel that's centrally located and has stylish guest rooms with balconies. On the ground floor, there's a cool bar and restaurant, not to mention a delicious breakfast each morning. I'll put a link to where you can book a room at this hotel in the description of this video on YouTube. After landing at 4:45 in the morning in Tbilisi, we take a taxi into the city, drop our bags off at the hotel, and start exploring. We spend the morning covering the sightseeing highlights of Tbilisi. We walk through Liberty Square with its column topped by a statue of St. George, check out the old city walls, and head up the famous Shota Rustaveli Avenue. After passing landmarks like the Georgian National Museum, Viceroy Palace, Georgian Museum of Fine Arts, Parliament, National Gallery, and Opera and Ballet Theatre of Tbilisi, we make our way north. Later we find ourselves on Shavteli Street. This narrow pedestrianized stretch has everything from a patchwork clock tower to a 6th century basilica and lots of shops and restaurants. After exploring the street, we take a short walk to the river. We cross the famous Bridge of Peace, a steel and glass pedestrian number that's one of the contemporary highlights of Tbilisi. Once on the other side of the river, we wander through the park, admire the views of Mother Georgia and the fortress, then cross another bridge to explore the old town and the bazaar. The bazaar is a tunnel-like space underground, and it's full of fun finds. After walking through it, we check out more of the area and see the sulfur bathhouse with its domed roofs. When we get hungry, we stop for lunch at a local restaurant. There we get our first taste of famous Georgian foods like khachapuri and khinkali. After lunch, we head out on a tour to see some of the sightseeing highlights near the city. I'll put a link to where you can book our tour in the description of this video on YouTube. Our first stop is a clifftop monastery that dates back to the 6th century. It has rich historical details and amazing views. After touring the monastery, our drive takes us to Meshketa. It's not only one of the oldest cities in Georgia, but also one of the oldest continually inhabited cities in the world. It's the birthplace of Christianity in Georgia, too. We're here to see the cathedral, an 11th century Orthodox church that's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The next stop on our tour is the Chronicles of Georgia. This monument is comprised of 16 tall pillars with metal sculptural reliefs. It was started in 1985 to commemorate the 3,000-year anniversary of Georgian statehood and the 2,000-year anniversary of Christianity in Georgia. Back in Tbilisi, we head out for drinks at Fabrika. This former factory has been transformed into a multifunctional cultural center packed with cafes and bars. After drinks, we walk to a restaurant in a former house that's tucked away on a residential street. The Georgian specialties are delicious. The next morning, we take the Tbilisi funicular to see views of the city. When we get to the top, we take in the panoramas. We see everything, including the Holy Trinity Cathedral of Tbilisi. Afterwards, we take a walk around the park and take in more views from the other viewpoints. Later in the morning, we're picked up for a day-long wine tour. I'll put a link to where you can book it in the description of this video on YouTube. When we arrive at the first winery, we take a tour of the modern facility, learning about the 8,000-year-old winemaking tradition in Georgia. We also get to see how they make wine in large clay vessels called kaveri. After the tour, we enjoy a delicious multi-course lunch and wine pairing in the tasting room. It's a great way to try Georgian specialties and see how the local wines taste with them. Our favorite is a red wine made from the Saperavi grape. From the winery, we drive to a mountain village. This historic place is full of cobbled streets and little shops. The village is also home to city walls that make up the longest fortification in Europe. We walk along them, taking in the views over the valley and the mountains. Afterwards, we do some wine tasting. After a sip from a roadside vendor our guide knows, we go to an official winery in the village. We're here for a short tour and tasting, and we see the kaveri buried in the ground, then settle in at a table by a fireplace and sip a range of Georgian wines. From the village, our wine tour continues with a trip to a vineyard. We're not here during the harvest, but there are a few grapes clinging to the vines. We do a quick pick, then drive to a local family's home to tread the grapes with our feet in a big wooden trough. I've always wanted to do this, and it's as fun as I imagined. After the crush, our host explains to us how to clean a kaveri. It's a pretty intense process. From there, we head downstairs into the cellar to do a wine tasting of his wine. After the tasting, we settle in for a supra, a traditional Georgian feast. It's delicious. The next morning, our itinerary continues with a day trip to the Rainbow Mountains, 2 monasteries, and another wine tasting. After an off-road drive past flocks of sheep and into the countryside, we pull up to a reservoir that's surrounded by mountains. From there, we start a 2.5-mile or 4-kilometer route that takes us up above the water and into the Rainbow Mountains. These unique hills are striped with natural colors, and they're beautiful to see up close. After the hike, we continue our day trip with a drive to a monastery dedicated to St. John the Baptist. Dating back to the 6th century, the cave monastery is steeped in history. After touring the monastery with our guide, we go to the tower outside and climb up it for beautiful views of the countryside. From there, we continue our day trip with a drive to the David Gareji monastery complex. It's on the slopes of Mount Gareja, and it's an ancient Georgian Orthodox site with a cave monastery. After visiting the monasteries, we stop in a local village for lunch. It's a great place to take in some traditional atmosphere and Georgian food. From lunch, we head to a local family's home for a quick tour and wine tasting. It's nice to see how people make wine in their own homes here. Back in Tbilisi, we had to dinner at a restaurant called Barbarestan. It's unique in that it serves traditional Georgian cuisine from recipes found in a historic cookbook. The atmosphere is cozy, the service attentive, and the food and Georgian wine are delicious. It's a great way to end our day. The next morning, we head off on another day trip. We're going to see everything from a reservoir to a fortress, mountains, and more. After a quick stop at a famous reservoir, we head to the Ananori Fortress complex. Dating back to the 17th century, it overlooks a reservoir, and it's a classic example of traditional Georgian architecture. From there, we stop at a local restaurant for lunch. It's fun to see local women making the dumplings in front of us. After lunch, we drive deep into the Caucasus Mountains. The scenery is stunning and we can't take our eyes off the views. Eventually, we reach the Gergeti Trinity Church. This sacred place was built in the 14th century and it's the highest elevation church in Georgia. From there, we head to the sister hotel of our hotel in Tbilisi. We're here for a quick hot chocolate stop. I'll put a link to where you can book a room in the description of this video on YouTube. The last stop on our tour is a Georgian-Russian friendship monument from the Soviet era. There are stunning views from it, and it's a great place to pick up a snack before we board the bus home. The next day, we head to Armenia for 2 days. That's the subject of a different video, but you can watch it here on my YouTube channel. At the end, we come back to Tbilisi for one last night.
Thanks for coming around Georgia with me. I hope you had a good time, and I hope my video has inspired you to get out and explore this part of the world yourself someday. This country is beautiful and it's worth a special trip. As I mentioned before, the full details are on my blog, aladyinlondon.com, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel before you go. Happy travels.